England in the early August carries a particular kind of quiet. The summer air rests lightly on the countryside. Soft clouds drift slowly across a pale sky. The fields stretch out in layered greens, separated by hedgerows and narrow roads that move through the landscape without urgency. Before dawn, the countryside near Cheddington lies almost entirely still. Only the faint rustle of leaves touches the air. A distant bird call. The low hum of wind brushing across the open fields. The railway line that cuts through the area seems half asleep at this hour. Steel rails glint with a cool, early light. Wooden sleepers rest in straight lines, stretching into distance. Telegraph poles stand like quiet sentinels along the track, leaning slightly with age. Nothing about this morning announces what is to come. The countryside holds its silence, and the London-Glasgow Royal Mail train moves steadily southward, cutting through the quiet in long, calm intervals. The train, often called the Up Special, carried mail, parcels, and bags of banknotes scheduled for transfer. Its journey was routine, its presence familiar to the night workers who loaded it, to the signalmen who guided it, to the small towns it passed through. Somewhere along its route, men waited in the darkness, their faces unseen, their movements unhurried. They had arrived earlier that night, near a small bridge called Bridgo Bridge, a quiet place tucked between fields, with a view of open land on either side. A place where the sound of a passing train rises briefly and then disappears into stillness again. They had prepared equipment, checked the rail signals, tested a battery and wire, nothing hurried, nothing loud. Visitors passing through the area that night would have seen nothing unusual, just the dim shapes of hedgerows and the slow shift of night air. The train continued its journey, unaware of what stood ahead. Shortly after 3 a.m. on the 8th of August, 1963, the Royal Mail train approached the signal at Bridego Bridge. The signal glowed red. The driver slowed, expecting a routine stop. The train eased to a halt in the soft darkness. The red signal had not been activated by railway staff. It had been altered. A glove placed over the green lamp, a battery powering the red. The train sat quietly on the track. Steam hissed gently around the wheels. The countryside remained silent except for the faint hum of the engine. Moments later, the driver climbed out of the cab to inspect the signal. In the dim light, shapes approached. Not many words were exchanged. Actions happened with calm coordination. The second man in the locomotive cab, the fireman, remained inside. He watched what unfolded in partial confusion, sensing more than he understood. The driver was brought back toward the locomotive. He was not harmed beyond necessity, though shaken. He was instructed to move the train a short distance forward under the bridge. He did so reluctantly. The train rolled slowly, wheels clicking over rails. Then it stopped again, beneath the arch. In the stillness, the sound of footsteps and quiet conversation carried slightly in the air. Bags were removed from the high-value package coach. The men worked in coordinated movements, lifting, passing, stacking. No alarm sounded. No neighbors nearby woke. The countryside absorbed the motion, holding the event in still pockets of sound. Around 2.6 million pounds was taken, equivalent to tens of millions today. The exact amount was counted later, not in the field. By the time the first birds began to stir, the men had gone. The bags had been loaded onto vehicles. The bridge returned to silence. The train remained, now strangely light in part of its cargo, still cooling in the early morning air. At first light, railway workers found the train stopped in an unusual place. The driver's injuries were attended to. The alarm was raised, but the area itself looked almost untouched. There were footprints near the tracks, marks on the embankment, a glove left behind, small hints of movement in the night. The high-value coach showed careful handling. No wild destruction, just the absence of what had once been secured inside. Not far from the railway line, a farm building, Leatherslade Farm, became part of the story. The men had used it as a hideout before and after the heist. Food wrappers, tools, documents, and fingerprints were discovered there later. The building sat quietly in the countryside, unaware that it now held traces of one of the most discussed robberies in British history. These discoveries formed the backbone of what was known. They came from observation, not interpretation, from objects left behind, not from stories told. Inside the farmhouse, investigators found sleeping bags, tin cans, milk bottles, pencil markings on walls, possibly used for keeping score during a card game. Nothing dramatic, just small signs of presence. On a table there were traces of plans, maps, notes, lists. Not detailed enough to reveal every decision made, but enough to confirm the level of preparation. In the field near the bridge, a glove and a homemade battery-operated signal device were discovered. Wires coiled loosely, a bulb, a battery, simple, functional, quiet. These objects were collected, photographed, and taken away, placed into storage, filed into evidence, the way that time holds certain objects, long after their purpose has faded. None of the items answered every question, but each served as a quiet reminder of the event. Some believe the group succeeded because they understood the rail system deeply. Others suggest their strength came from planning, not technical knowledge. It is possible that someone with insider knowledge gave them details about the high-value coach. Another interpretation is that the men learned what they needed through observation alone. There are theories about the amount taken. Some say they expected more. Others believe the figure was exactly what they planned for. There are interpretations about their movements after the heist, why they chose the farmhouse, how long they stayed, why the group eventually dispersed. Some believe mistakes made at the farmhouse led to the eventual identification and arrest of many involved. Others argue that the operation was already unraveling as soon as it ended. The truth sits somewhere between these possibilities, shaped by records, testimonies, and the quiet gaps that remain. None of these theories rewrite the event. They sit alongside it, not replacing it. They remain part of the silent outline that surrounds the known facts. Today, the railway bridge stands much as it did in 1963. Cars pass above it. Trains continue their journeys below. Grass grows along the embankments. The fields stretch out, shaped by the same winds that moved through them that night. The farmhouse, once the temporary shelter for the group, has changed over time. Its connection to the event remains in memory, not in daily life. The surrounding countryside has its own rhythm, slow, steady, ordinary. Children walk to school. Farmers tend to their land. Trains travel on schedule. The Great Train Robbery has become part of local history, a story told in small museums, a note in regional archives, a moment that left physical traces, all of which have now faded or been removed. The land holds no visible reminder of that night. Only the documents and recollections remain. More than 60 years have passed. The men involved have lived out their lives. Some served long sentences. Some disappeared from public view. Some have passed away. The money, largely unrecovered, has long since dispersed into the currents of time, spent, hidden, or lost. Its path no longer traceable. The story retains a sense of incompleteness, not because details are missing, but because time softens certainty. Witness memories fade, records shift. The significance of the event becomes quieter as years accumulate. The countryside remains unchanged in its essence. The bridge still casts the same shadow over the tracks. The early morning still carries the same soft quiet. The Great Train Robbery rests now as a faint echo, one chapter among many in the long stretch of British history, a moment of movement in the night, a calm interruption in an otherwise ordinary landscape. A story that does not end with resolution, but with the silence that follows and the distance that time creates.